Welcome, everyone. Brainerd Carey here, Director of Praxis Center for Aesthetics. And this is this week's video just for members here in this group. And so welcome, everybody. And I always like to begin by thanking all of you for being such great members in this group. When you comment on each other's posts, it's really awesome. It's just what a group's about. It's the supportive atmosphere of this tribe, of this group. So I always like to thank you guys a lot for doing that, because it's what makes this a kind of generous, supportive atmosphere. That's everything to me, and it's everything to I think a supportive group that's struggling together to do a lot of different types of tasks. So today, again, welcome tribe, welcome members. I'm going to answer all your questions at the end of this. And I want to, again, thank you guys for being part of this and for suggesting talks like this. You can always suggest talks, and I will produce them at the end of the week. So don't hesitate, even in this thread, to suggest a talk that you'd like to see on a specific topic. Last week, someone asked about lawyers and artists, and I'll be doing a talk on that. So again, thanks for being here. Great to have you guys, and I want to today talk about creating a pop-up collaboratively, a pop-up exhibition collaboratively. What that means, and how you can do it, and how that can benefit you. So at the end of this talk, which won't be too long, I'm going to answer all your questions. I see there's a lot of people on today, so welcome all of you guys. Great to have you here. Today I'm going to talk about how to start a collaborative and have a collaborative exhibition, a pop-up exhibition. So as an example, what I want to talk about is a show called the Frieze Show that took place in London in the 80s. It was a bunch of students from Goldsmiths College got together, all unknown artists, and they decided to have an exhibit. And what they did was they got together. There was quite a few of them. I think there was about 15 in total. And they decided they were going to find a warehouse space to rent, an inexpensive space. And they'd all have a show and do as much as they could to make it a great show. Well, Damien Hirst was one of those artists. I believe Tracy Emin and a lot of other artists that became known as the YBAs. What happened was, they decided first we need a space, right? They used an empty warehouse space that was very inexpensive to rent. Then they decided, they asked the landlord, can we use this space? It's going to attract a lot of attention, and the landlord gave it to them for a nominal fee, almost nothing. And then they said, okay, we're going to gather this group of artists. And they decided to title the show Frieze, and which is a good idea, so it feels curated. And then they also decided to have a catalog, and they decided to try to see who could pay for this catalog. They went around to try to ask people, would you do this? A whole bunch of students are getting together. They're going to have a show. I mean, initially, this is the kind of thing that does not seem like would be attractive to other people. A bunch of students are having a show. They're not even artists that have exhibited before. It's a student show. But they talked about it in a way that they said, this is going to be really exciting. It's a bunch of us doing this. It's going to be in a big space. And they wanted to have a catalog. So eventually they got money together to have a catalog. Some of them all contributed a little bit. They also got the landlord of the space to contribute some money. And so they had this nice looking catalog. Then they thought, can we get an essay for this catalog? It'd be cool to get a local critic who would write an essay about some of the work before the show was up. Pretty ambitious idea, but these are all elements of a pop-up show that you could use, and I'll talk more about that. So to go more into what they did, they got a local critic to write a catalog essay, and they produced a handsome catalog. And they had the show. The show attracted a lot of people, partly because when there's a group show of 10 people or 15 people, as opposed to doing a show with 2 or 3 people, all of those 10 or 15 people are inviting friends. They're inviting, the people that they know to the show. And when that happens, it just increases the amount of people that are coming, of course. You don't have to worry so much about, are all your friends coming and will there be enough people coming? Because everybody's inviting different people and everybody has the same goal. They had a few meetings regularly to talk about who can we get to this show. Can we get someone like Charles Saatchi to the show? Can we get a collector to the show? Does anybody know any collectors? And does anybody know a way that we could get, a museum director or museum person to that show? Together, it's easier to be ambitious like that, right? You're having a pop-up show by yourself or with one person, and you say, do you know anybody? Do you know a museum director or writer? And you may not, neither person may know. But when you get 10 artists together and it's something that's going to benefit all of you, it becomes a lot easier to do. And the possibilities of being able to invite a director or invite someone like a critic to come is more possible. In the case of this Notorious Free show, which again is a pop-up run by students that were graduating Goldsmiths College in London, in the case of that pop-up, what they did well. They got a review in The Guardian. It was a great critic that wrote the catalog essay. Ultimately, after it was the opening was up, it was open for a few weeks. Different people sat in the show to watch it, and a museum director did combine a curator from the Tate Gallery. Not that they bought anything. Charles Saatchi did buy something from one of the artists later, but it's an example of how to put together a pop-up show and how it was successful there. It was the number of people that were working on it, so it's nice to have at least 5 artists, I would say. If you can get more, great. It just makes it more ambitious, because if you have the ambition to put together 5 or more artists, which unquestionably takes energy and time to look at other artists' work and make sure you think this works together. Whoever's listening to this right now, there's a lot of you listening right now, but either one of you could take it on yourself to do this. So the first step would be to designate yourself as a type of curator of this pop-up. You're an artist curator of a pop-up. And, whoever you are, whether it's Luna, Gregory, Laura, or Leslie, or Eva, I know all of you are on here as well as others, and I'm going to get to your questions in the end. You designate yourself as the person who is the curator, the organizer. And what that means is you go out and you pick 4 or 5 artists. And you can even ask those 4 or 5 artists, could they suggest another 2 artists that they think should be in it? Because you'd like this to be a bigger show of like 15 artists. Now, of course, you also have to find a space, right? Where are you going to have this show? It could be in another artist's studio, depending on where you are. It could be in real estate space. Even in New York City, there's an awful lot of empty storefronts. In a lot of cities and towns, there's empty storefronts. And the way Damien Hirst, as well as those other artists, kind of negotiated with the landlord of the space is they said, look, we're going to bring a lot of people by here. And there are people who are interested in art. They're sophisticated people that have money, and looking at your space will give it more visibility, and you'll possibly rent it in the future. That's an attractive proposal for New York storefronts. That's an attractive proposal for any realtor anywhere, as long as they don't think it's going to be some crazy blowout of a party. So that's how it begins, right? You negotiate with someone for the space. The bigger the space you get, obviously, the better. One aspect of getting it from a landlord is you want them to have the liability insurance. Now, liability insurance doesn't actually cost that much. It would be well under $1,000 for a few nights or a week. And liability insurance basically means if someone falls and injures themselves, that there's an insurance policy to cover it. In most public venues, that's required. So again, the landlord often has that insurance running on the space all the time. Libraries can also be these kind of spaces. A church basement could be these kind of spaces. You have to be creative in how you're looking at it. I'll talk about another type of show. in a moment that one artist did. But essentially, that's how the show's built. You designate yourself, either one of you designate yourself as a curator, artist, organizer. You ask 3 or 4 other artists that you know whose work you like and whose work you think would work with yours, and whose work is also local to you, right? Who's within your area, because this is happening in your town, ideally, to make it easier for you. And then you ask those artists to all invite 2 or 3 others for you to review, and all of you to review, to make sure it looks good together. And you find a space that's going to house all this. If you end up not getting a space big enough, then you have to cut down the show and potentially cut out some of the artists. That happens. But you could also, as soon as you're talking to the first 5 people, go out and look for your space. Again, church basement, unused gymnasium, abandoned commercial building. There's quite a few of those, as well as unused retail space. You're only using it for a week, I would say, a week at the most. It's all about the opening, and if you can have artists stay in there a few days afterwards, great. But it's really about the opening, and maybe the most the show's open for is a week. If you can put together a catalog, there's also ways to get sponsors. You could all split it, or and do like a kind of blurb thing, or the landlord could also help, or other local businesses could also help. Okay, so that's one idea. That's the architecture of a pop-up show, right? That's one way of doing it. There are other notorious examples of solo artists doing it. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary Exit Through the Gift Shop. It was cut together by a movie made by Banksy, and he basically told the story of an artist called Mr. Brainwash, someone who really just decided he's going to be an artist, and he's going to be a graffiti type artist in LA, and he's going to have a big show, and it's going to be a huge success. And basically, he rented a large unused studio, kind of in LA. It was kind of an abandoned series of studio buildings for making movies in. So, there were huge buildings that weren't being used, unheated buildings. He was able to use those for a week, and then he began working on how is he going to get publicity for it. And again, it's just him, right? So he came up with an idea. He, in press releases, he said the first, 200 people there will get a free poster, will get a free image signed. He eventually, whether it was sanctioned or not, said, Banksy said, yeah, great show or great artist, and he used that as well. And he had a show, and his show was controversial, really. He also had a DJ. He got a fairly well-known DJ, Shepard Fairey, hired him, well-known artist to DJ. And so, the party there was some, I wouldn't say star power, but a little bit. He had a great DJ, or at least a known one. And he hired someone to help him with publicity. I actually interviewed that person a while ago. And, paid that person $500. I'm not saying you have to do all of these things. He was one person, so it becomes much more daunting when it's just one person. And basically, the show was a great success. A lot of people came. He produced a lot of art that were prints. He had people help him make the art. He was modeling himself on a kind of graffiti artists like Brito, like others that are kind of commercializing their work as much as possible, making prints and reproductions and working like a factory and turning out a lot of work on paper very fast. But regardless of how he made it, his idea was to fill this whole giant space up. And he did. He filled up an enormous amount of space, and he sold a lot of art that day. Claims to have sold well over 100,000. That's a solo person putting up a pop-up show that was temporary, and then being ambitious enough to really kind of work the press, to come up with ideas. Nowadays, if you did that, running local Facebook ads would be one way to do it. You can run an ad on Facebook that says, come to this opening. There's 10 artists, one day only. free something for the first 10 people that arrive, or the first 100 people. You could have a DJ there or some other musical entertainment. A local Facebook ad, which perhaps I'll make another video on how to do, is a very inexpensive way to reach those people. Okay, so I've said a lot, I know. So I just want to recap this. I talked about the Frieze show, which you could look up that kind of launched a whole scene in London. It was just students graduating from college who organized that. And again, they rented a very inexpensive, unused factory warehouse-like space, and a large group of them had a show, and they put together their resources. Who do we know? Can we make a catalog? Can we get someone to pay for that catalog? They made a nice catalog of that show. And they got someone to write an essay in that catalog. They probably had to pay that person to write an essay. Maybe not a lot, but writers don't make a fortune. They're even ones that are writing reviews, they're not getting paid so much. So that's accessible to you. They did that. And then they had an opening, and because there was quite a few of them, a lot of people came. They got a lot of notoriety. It launched careers. It quite simply launched careers. And then the other example I gave, Mr. Brainwash, a graffiti artist, he did it all alone. Much harder to do because you don't have the kind of support and ambitions of all the other people in the group. He did it alone. So the way he did it was also renting a huge space like they had and finding a way to make enough art to fill up that giant space, because that's not an easy thing to do. So those are the ways of having a pop-up show. Let's say you're in a small town or a city. The steps to make a pop-up show right now is to, number one, designate yourself as the artist curator, the artist organizer. So Luna is the artist organizer. Gregory is the artist organizer. Eva is the artist organizer. Laura is the artist organizer. That's how it begins. And then you ask 3, 4 friends that you know, or you look for artists that you know if you don't have other artist friends locally. Go to local shows and invite other people. Say, I'm working on this thing. I'm putting together a pop-up show, and I'm trying to curate 5 artists into it. And I'd like to talk to you about it. I'd like to know if you'd like to be involved. We're having a meeting about it in a cafe on Saturdays in the afternoon. And you begin talking about it. You try to get a space. Again, empty realty space, empty real estate is ideal. Even commercial space is even better, like a storefront or a department store that's now empty. I mean, we see real estate empty everywhere, largely because of the Amazon phenomena of ordering on mail. There's a lot of retail space and even warehouse space empty these days in towns and cities, including New York City. So you talk to those people, you meet once a week on Saturdays, and you begin to build the show. Negotiate with someone to get the space either for free or very inexpensively. They turn on the lights. You're only doing it for a week. You could even do it for 3 days. The opening is the main thing. You could have a catalog also and ask a writer. You can take a month or so to develop this. If you have these 3 or 4 artists, ask them while you're meeting on Saturdays to invite other artists, to bring in 3 artists next week. Just show the images, don't bring them physically to the meeting. And then you, as the lead curator, can with them help curate a really good show of work that goes together. And then you have the show, and what can this do for you? For one, it builds a community, a physical community, right? We have a community here in this group, but this is about building a real physical community of artists where you live. But it also gets your work out there. And when working with more people, the possibilities of getting better curators over there and writers increases dramatically. Also, the idea of having more people involved, like 5 or 10 or 15 artists or more, brings in an enormous amount of people, many more. I remember seeing, it was in New York on the Lower East Side, someone did a show on, and this could, and I'm not saying to do this, but just to talk about how group shows can generate a huge crowd. they came up with an idea that you could do in your town, where they said, "Hey, we're looking for artists to make small paintings on the backs of Metro cards, which are about this big, little New York City Metro cards for the subway." That's a pretty tiny card. It's like a business card. They got a lot of submissions, maybe 100 submissions. They put up everything. They're teeny, so they stacked them on the walls. It was a small nonprofit gallery. You couldn't get in the gallery. It was packed. I mean, 100 artists. Imagine they each invite 2 or 3 people. It's a huge opening. So I'm not saying to do one with 100 artists. These are possibilities. I'm saying to start off small with 5 artists, get a space. It could be a rental space, or you could ask, again, a library or a church basement or somebody's barn or somebody's house or somebody's apartment or studio. So that's how to create a pop-up exhibition. It has tremendous possibility because it can get you a lot of visibility without so much work on your behalf, because it's collaborative. And once you do one successfully, it can happen again. And sales can be made here. If not at the space itself, artists are contacted afterwards and studio visits are made. So, okay, that's my talk. I'm going to answer your questions if you have any. Let's see. So lots of people. Yes. Hi, Sue. Hi, Eva. Okay. Great to see so many of you guys here. Didn't Mr. Brainwash mortgage his home for all his work and publicity? I don't know whether he mortgaged his home or not. He obviously leveraged a lot of money. He took a huge gamble. There's no question that what Mr. Brainwash did was much more of a gamble, for sure. But he, maybe he leverages his home. I don't know. He made a good bet in that case. He was ready for sales, and a lot of them, and he made a lot of them, and that got him other gigs, doing album covers, and he did another pop-up show after that in New York because it was so successful. Would you personally invite consultants, gallerists, curators going to their office with a personal invitation? Sue, absolutely. Absolutely, I would do that. Go to their office with a personal invitation. I had a studio and a storefront in the East Village of New York. And when I first did shows there, which are pop-up shows by myself, I wrote a press release and I went around to the newspapers in New York and I walked into their offices and I hand delivered it. And I walked into other places and hand delivered it. And I'd go in there and I'd say, where is, this critic? And they'd say, oh, over there. And I'd hand it to them. That got me press. It was amazing. You can do that in other gallerists' offices, consultants, absolutely. There's nothing like personal invitations physically. It's inspiring. Everybody gets emails and some postcards these days, not too many, but a personal invitation is kind of hard to turn down, and it's impressive. Gregory, would you have this pop-up show during the time when the city has events like Art After Dark or during the organized artist studio walk? Is it a bad idea to compete with these local events? Good question, Gregory. I think you can go either way. For sure, the satellite art fairs pop up all around other fairs, so you could do it during those times. You absolutely could. However, you are competing with all these other events, right? Including art walks and everything else. You become like one more thing. If you're doing it at a time that's outside of those things, I think you have a greater likelihood of generating a crowd just for you. But it's 50-50 either way. It'd be good to experiment with both, because the reason these small satellite fairs happen around the Armory and others is because there's a crowd there, and that crowd could potentially, if you're in a location that's central and you can get the word out to all of those people by handing out postcards outside events and really working that crowd, then yes, absolutely, that could generate a crowd too. I would begin by doing it. I do it either way, Gregory. I would begin though by doing it outside of one of those events, possibly, unless you're feeling really ambitious right away, because if you're doing it with one of those events, you're competing with those crowds as well as having to work all those crowds, meaning handing cards out everywhere, inviting people over, as opposed to the first one being a little more relaxed, having an event that's in control and doesn't have tons of foot traffic in there if you're centrally located. Hope that's helpful. Feel free to ask again. Bill, would it be distracting to put up a show at a microbrewery? That's possible. Maybe not. It just has to be a space where it'll look good. Could happen at a microbrewery. Could be perfect. The microbrewery could serve beer. The microbrewery could help fund the catalog. The microbrewery could help contribute to the show if you make it ambitious enough. But if the walls of the microbrewery are not very interesting and the lighting's really poor, then maybe not. Or maybe you have to bring in some lighting. But absolutely, a microbrewery could work. That could be kind of the perfect storm, right? To give out discounted beer or not, and have this big show. So absolutely, Bill, that's a possibility. Eva, is it good to set the opening date when other art events are happening? People are out anyways, or is it better to open a date when there aren't many other openings? In New York, that is. Well, in New York, like the opening date is Thursday night, right? They were trying to get it away from Saturdays, so it wouldn't be like this big party night now. Thursday is the new Saturday, or maybe it's switching around again. But essentially, the answer to that is, like I was saying to Gregory, that can work. In New York, there are plenty of galleries that have shows that are not Thursday night, that are not the typical night for openings. Because what happens at openings is everybody goes to all of the openings. They go through kind of quick. They drink wine or whatever you have there, and they leave. For some galleries, that's great. It's visibility. For others, they feel like it's not the crowd that they want. They want people who are not kind of partying and going around or just going from like booth to booth like you would almost at an art walk. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things, but it's a different vibe. So Eva, in New York City, yeah, that's how it, galleries even differ on this. There's the Thursday night where everybody's out, but you'll see even throughout Chelsea and the Lower East Side, others are picking other nights so that they can get their own crowd there in their own way. I would say initially, if you're centrally located, if you have a studio in Chelsea or something, yeah, you could do it on that night, and then you could get a listing in the gallery guide or other places. But I think it could work just as well on another night, and it might be better to start with a non kind of event-oriented night. So not so much so you don't compete with them, because as you're saying, you can benefit from that traffic as satellite art fairs do and other things. But so the first one is kind of really under control, and the crowd you're getting is from the artists that are there, that who's coming, and they'll be more attentive because they're all the artists' friends, as opposed to these big opening crowds that are going to come in and out and just look if you have alcohol or not. So I would start. I think they're both good ideas, but I would start. My suggestion is to start with one that's on an off night, and then as that succeeds, work on one that's a night where that's more populated, because there is advantages to that. But the first one, I think, is nice for it to be a little more intimate, so you're getting the people there who are friends of friends of friends, and they'll pay a little more attention. Okay. Laura, would you pay the landlord a flat fee or a percentage of sales? That's a good question, Laura. Laura's my sister. So what you would do is you would pay a flat fee, and oftentimes they'll give it to you for free. In New York City, there's an organization called Shishama. Shishama is run by Anita Durst. The Durst family are kind of real estate barons in New York, kind of infamous ones, or one of them is, and they have access to a lot of storefronts. And what they do is, through juried process, they put people in those storefronts, and the landlords are giving them away. And it's not that their parents or their family owns all these storefronts, but they know the real estate business. And what they say to them is, hey, this storefront's empty. We'd like to put artists in here. We'll cover the insurance for the month, and there'll be somebody here watching it. So I wouldn't give them a percentage of the sales. I don't think they're interested in that. The landlords are interested in traffic into the space, people in the space, period. That's all. So a flat fee at the most, free at best, because you're giving them something that they want, which is attention to their space that's not rented. Leslie, I'm in one of those curated pop-ups on 26th in the Village. I'll post the press release after the video. Okay, great. You're welcome, Gregory. I'm seeing tons of micro breweries popping up. It's like the new Starbucks. Yeah, absolutely, Leslie. That's possible, and they would be into something like this potentially, as Bill was saying. It's a possibility. Yulia says, is it generally better to get a space with more inherent visibility that is centrally located or in a lesser known area further from the city center? Well, good question. In the first example that I gave, that was definitely a space that was, the YBA show, the Free show in London, that was not centrally located, not in a great location, but people could get to it. Not so far off, close enough. Ideally, yeah, somewhere where people can get to it fairly easy. It depends where you live, Yulia, but ideally a space where people can get to. However, having a show in a place like a beautiful home or a barn somewhere that is out of the way but kind of exotic could be worth the drive, right? The trek to get there, because it's something special. So I've seen pop-up shows done that way. I had a friend who had a show that I helped her put together, and it was done in a beautiful historic home. Everybody wanted to come because it was in a historic home, off the track for sure, way out of town. But people came for that reason. So if there's a reason and the space is exciting, absolutely off the beaten track would work. Otherwise, it's something centralized that people can get to is obviously easier for most people if this space isn't special somehow. Although microbreweries might be an exception, right? Because people want to see it. What would be the best marketing bang for the buck? Well, the best marketing bang for the buck, Bill, really is if you have 5 or 10 or 15 artists in this pop-up show, having all of them reach out to all of their friends and collaborating with them on creating a good way to reach out. That means physically asking their friends, bringing people over. The other way, the biggest bang for your buck would be using local Facebook ads. That's one way to do it. But physical people, if you have 5 or 10 people in the show, asking them to bring their friends, to invite their friends, and also to have some entertainment there. If you have a poetry reading, if you have someone, giving out, something, ice cream, a brewery giving out beer, if you have musicians playing, that's also great publicity, right? Those musicians want more people there, they'll tell people. So when you have more events, more activities that you're probably not paying anything for, they will generate more publicity and more people there. If you have a press release you're sending out and you say there's, a poet, a juggler, a band, guitarist, and 15 artists, it starts sounding pretty dynamic and exciting, and you get a lot of bang for little or no bucks there. Otherwise, in terms of advertising, press release is free to send, but to local blogs, places, in terms of advertising, a local Facebook ad would get you far. You can spend $30 on that. If everybody chipped in, 10 people chipped in $10, you have like $100 just to run that ad, which is a lot. Feel free to ask me more, you guys. Luna says, I once had an art show at a church in England. Well, there was also a befriended band playing, so we collaborated nicely. People enjoyed art, music, and a relaxed atmosphere. Very enjoyable. Yeah, great idea. That's the idea. That can work. Sue says she's had several shows at microbreweries. Not the best results for sales, but they were well attended. One brewery even allowed me to create a beer for my opening named after me. It was a great collaborative effort, but no sales. That was here in Denver, in Aurora. Okay, good point. So talk about breweries. Sue gave a great example of how a beer was even named after her or the show. In terms of sales, pop-up shows sometimes they are places where sales can be made. But ideally, the idea of a pop-up show, just like the first one I mentioned that launched the careers of all those artists, was visibility, just to show work and have the work seen. But if you want sales like Mr. Brainwash has, you need someone there who's dedicated to sales. I'm thinking of pop-up shows in this video as a way to generate visibility and potentially launch careers. But that's because there are curators or other people that were invited that saw the work that then want to talk to the artist afterwards. So it has to be great work, and it has to look good on the walls too. And if you want to make sales, collectively, you have to either hire or give someone a commission to be a salesperson. You could base it on commission only and give them $50 for the night just for working the crowd. When someone looks at something, they say, "Do you like that?" And they ask them if they want to make a sale, and they take a check or cash, or they use a card reader on a phone to make a sale. But to make sales at a pop-up opening, because the artists are going to be busy, you need someone there who's actually making the sales. And you could hire that person and give them a nice commission, like 25%. Okay. How about collaborating with a cause? Bill says, yeah, great idea. Collaborating with a cause is great. The great thing about collaborating with a cause, like let's say animal welfare, the ASPCA, is if you say, we're going to have a pop-up show here, a group show, and we're going to raise money, we're going to give 50% of all the proceeds to your organization. I wouldn't give more than 50%. That's a great idea, because then they will send it out to their mailing list, and it's a way for them to generate money. So that is possible to work with a cause you'd like. Good idea, Bill. Luna, how much should one ask for in terms of tickets? Perhaps the first 20 free, then $10. Tickets, you mean tickets to the opening? I would say the opening should be free. Even if there's if that's what you mean, tickets to the event, to the opening, I think the opening should be free. You could make it a ticketed opening, but unless there's a lot of events or something really excited there, I think these kind of events tend not to be ticketed. So I would make it free. Great. So great talking to you guys. You can always ask more questions in this thread. Would love to hear more about pop-ups you're creating or things you're doing. So keep me posted. And also, as a member of this group, this tribe, you can ask me to generate more videos on a topic of your choice. Just put them in this thread, or make a separate post that says, Brainerd, I'd love for you to do a video on this. And I'll do it if I can do it, or hire an expert to do it as well. So thank you all for being with me here today. Again, great to have you in this tribe. I so appreciate all the comments you make on each other's work. I think being supportive is huge. I just got an email from an artist the other day that was a little bit sad. Someone I've known for a while and worked with for a while, and she said, was in the group for a while, and she said, she's doing really well. She's having a lot of success, and she noticed that, her friends now aren't very excited about her success. That they actually kind of begrudgingly, give her kind of a compliment and ask her, how did that happen? How did you get that? And, she said she was sad about it and has kind of distanced herself from those friends, but wanted to know what I thought about that. And perhaps I'll do another talk just on that. But, artistic success sometimes makes others jealous. So part of the excitement of this group is the support you give one another. When someone has success in this group, I've seen what happens. Someone says, I got a show, I got a grant, I got a residency, I just sold 3 pieces, or all kinds of things happen. And there's a whole string of congratulations, that's so exciting, good for you, or also, what did you do? And that's all fine. So I want to thank you all for being supportive, because in many ways that's uncommon, and it's important, I think, to the survival of the human race, and especially artists, that we're supportive and loving of one another, especially our successes, because it's a struggle for artists, struggle for all of us. So thank you again for supporting one another. And let's see, any more comments? Satya, how do you value your artworks? I'll do another talk about that. I've done talks about that. Um, uh, and um, and yes, we'll do talks about um, negativity as well. Absolutely. But there's other videos on how to value your artwork, how to price your artwork that I hope you'll see, because I could do another whole talk on that. So thank you guys, and don't hesitate to post a question about that, and I'll answer that in a separate post. Thank you guys again. Being the wonderful group that you are, I really appreciate all the love that you share with comments and support for each other. So thank you, and I wish you all a great day in your studio or wherever you are. Take care.